Hi, my name is Peyton Gallick, and today I have the task of introducing Aislinn Choo. When writing this intro, Aislinn's cool fashion sense and incredible artwork immediately came to mind. However, what really stuck out to me was the memories we created together in Latin, specifically sophomore year. Picture this. Half the grade was at school and the other was at home, with some days being synchronous and others asynchronous due to COVID. Aislinn and I walked into Latin on the first day, quickly learning that we were the only people with last names at the beginning of the alphabet. As a result of this, class every day consisted of Dr. McFadden, Aislinn, and me. Even during this time, Aislinn made me feel confident in class because I knew they already had some wise answer prepared for whenever I got stuck on a question. I know that Aislinn will grace us today with those same wise words that I heard so many times, so everyone give it up for Aislinn Choo.
It was June 11th, about 11:40 a.m. on a Saturday, that I found myself enraptured by Vincent van Gogh. It was a sort of strange realization, nothing life-changing. It wasn't as if some holy light burst from the heavens, broke the ceiling, and shone over me. It was simply a rush of fascination and desire to learn more about this strange artist. It all began with the immersive Van Gogh, an exhibit that used animated projections alongside music to immerse the viewer in Van Gogh's world. This happened to be our field trip for the Governor's School for the Arts. We had stepped into the building, I, sticky with sweat from waiting an ungodly amount of time to be let into our buses, and everyone else either annoyed that they had to see the show, excited because they would get to see the show, or ambivalent to the entire thing. Despite my sweaty state, I can certainly say I was excited. After all, my family and I had attended the exhibit in Atlanta, and I absolutely adored it. But as Nashville's exhibit began with strange, almost ominous music, accompanied by flickering black and white drawings of cicadas, a painter's easel, Vincent's name scribbled in red ink, and Vincent himself with a hat garlanded with candles, I frowned. Yeah, no, this was something entirely different. We were visually transported through phases of his life and the art that was created alongside it. Golden fields of wheat, as Edith Piaf sang loudly and proudly about having no regrets, Paris with its constant artistic evolution, Arles with the yellow house, and, of course, Van Gogh's art from his time at a mental asylum. And even when the exhibit ended solemnly, communicating Van Gogh's fate to the audience that already knew, I felt a strange sense of harmony and inspiration. For a time, I only knew the bare bones about the man. I knew he was an artist from the Victorian era, and his life was defined by sadness and mental illness. He was sent to an asylum, and that was where a great amount of his art was created. The end. But this summary, as summaries usually are, is hardly the actual entire story. I'd almost argue that it's reductive in terms of summaries. Oh dear. My pages were out of order. Van Gogh wasn't completely and utterly alone, nor did he always sit and fester in his silence. Sadness. And that brings me to the subject of the tortured artist. We love that almost mythological martyr-like figure. We love the idea that one must suffer to create truly beautiful, poignant art. Vincent van Gogh, the poster child of tortured artists. He certainly checks all the boxes. In fact, the moment one mentions the tortured artist, Van Gogh is probably one of the first artists you think of. But the thing is, the tortured artist doesn't exist. It exists as an idea, of course, but as a real human trait that only some are lucky enough to get, no. The tortured artist is merely another romanticized view of mental illness and is about as realistic as those black and white stock photos of people with their heads in their hands that show up when you Google depression. Artist pain is the moniker, and in a very literal sense, that's true. Hand cramps are not fun. However, what the phrase really means is that art is only real if it was born from constant suffering. I think even if I never mentally acknowledged it, I embraced this idea of the tortured artist. Being neurodivergent and, shocker, an artist, the idea that my suffering somehow made me a better artist was nice to consider. It's far easier to believe that your pain has some sort of divine meaning behind it, that you'll be able to create something beautiful and poignant for the world, and that your pain means something far beyond just improving and teaching your inner self. So you overextend yourself. You pull all-nighters. You refuse to seek help or better yourself for fear that you might lose that supposed divine spark. And perhaps you do create something beautiful. Was it worth it? For me, that answer is no. I'm burnt out, exhausted physically, and will never truly be pleased with the hypothetical peace. And yet, this cycle has gone on and on and on to the point where, at times, I'll even question if I like art anymore. So, naturally, I've realized that I create art far more in a better place. From the feeling of the autumn breeze brushing against me to my class throwing tangled balls of yarn at each other as we shared apologies and memories, all of these experiences have inspired me to create far more than any bouts of depression ever have. This all leads back to my thoughts on Vincent van Gogh. Starry Night and Almond Blossom, they were painted while he was in the asylum, when he was getting help. Many of his later famous works were made while he was recovering outside of the asylum as well. In fact, many other tortured artists' most well-known works were created when they were in a happier mental state. We should create because it makes us happy. Having to suffer for your art, or any other hobby you indulge in, is not some sacred law that can't be broken under any circumstance. There's nothing wrong with needing to vent our frustrations onto a canvas, and it's okay to struggle while you are creating. But that doesn't mean you have to disregard your needs out of fear that you'll lose your spark. Trust me when I say you won't. Our art shouldn't be born from our suffering. Our art should be born despite it. Thank you.